I still struggle a lot with, I mean, you know, when you grow up in a predominantly white space and you're not white, I think you are trying to fit expectations that you'll never meet. Specifically, like growing up as a young Black woman. You know, when I was in high school, I think 2013, 2012, you know, I grew up in the age of Trayvon Martin, and I remember that was sort of my first glimpse into police brutality, and like outside the context of hearing stories from my family. And I think for me, that just showed me the power of my voice and my ability to educate myself on what was going on in the world. I think up to that point, I had relied a lot on like the school system and you know, my family and stuff to sort of inform my worldview. But I think in high school, I really started taking my education and like beyond just English or math, like my education of the world into my own hands. I started reading more, I started becoming more interested in politics. I stopped saying the Pledge of Allegiance, and I stopped standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. I got told by a classmate to go back to Africa if I didn't like it. I was born in Irvine, California, so South Orange County. I grew up around the Lake Forest, Mission Viejo area. Very predominantly white, predominantly Christian, predominantly Republican. My father's Black, my mom is white. So yeah, I was one of very few kids of color in my schools growing up, in my elementary school and high school. My parents got divorced when I was around 5 or 6, 5 maybe, I don't really know. The details are blurry, but my dad moved down to San Diego after that, and so I split time between Orange County and San Diego. I think, you know, I had a pretty traumatic childhood because of the divorce. My parents are friends now, but for a while, like, wouldn't speak to each other, so it was just a lot of back and forth, sort of trying to figure out who I was and where I fit in. So I have a bit of a unique sports experience. Both my mom and dad were Division I athletes at UCLA. My dad was a football player and my mom was a gymnast. And so I think athletics was sort of not only embedded in my DNA, like in terms of athleticism, but also just like culturally within my family. I think sports were a big deal. So I started playing soccer when I was 5, I think. I loved it as a kid. It became pretty apparent pretty early that I was like decently good at it. I think soccer for me, looking back now, became really a safe space for me because like no matter what was going on in my life, soccer was the one area where my parents would both always show up, and it was a consistent place where my family felt whole. And I think, you know, as I grew up and I started going through the levels and soccer started getting more serious, and as I started taking it more seriously, it still remains sort of that core safe space. And I think it taught me some pretty important lessons in leadership, in confidence, in, you know, valuing myself, in just, you know, working hard and practicing and making myself the best version of myself that I could be. I don't think I would be the leader I am today without soccer. I had a coach in high school, Sean, who really emphasized the idea of servant leadership to me. And I think that in a lot of ways, activism is servant leadership. How can you show up in your community and serve others? And so I think that's probably the very beginnings of where sports started intersecting with activism for me, but not technically, I guess, until college when I was a sophomore. So I was 19, and I decided to kneel for the national anthem that played before our games in solidarity with Colin Kaepernick, and Megan Rapinoe had been doing it for the national team for a little bit. So I decided that I wanted to take it into my own life, and yeah, I just felt really, really, really compelled. It was sort of an inexplicable wave of overwhelming desire to kneel. I feel very guided by like ancestral guidance which, you know, I know that not all of us believe in ancestors or spirituality, but I feel very strongly guided by not only like my own familial line and, you know, the people who created me and whose DNA I carry, but also just the forefathers of social change, especially for the Black community. Like, I just feel very strongly about carrying on their legacy and picking up the burden that they left and that they carried for so long. One thing that overwhelms me is like a sense of duty, which I don't think we talk about in this idea of activism enough. Like, it really does feel like a duty to me, and that's not to say that it's like, you know, I feel like a lot of times when we think of duty, it has like sort of a negative connotation, but I really see it as a positive thing. I think we really do have a duty to continue pushing the ball forward, the ball of progress forward. And I carry the burden proudly. I advocated using my sport, and I think it was sort of in my last year of playing in 2020 that I realized soccer was more of a vehicle for me to eventually reach my end goals than I had ever thought before. Like, in the aftermath of soccer, I realized that it gave me an amazing platform to be able to set a foundation for what I wanted to do. It gave me a great platform to reach different perspectives and audiences and to sort of share my perspectives with the world. It gave me the skills that I needed to be an advocate. It taught me how to be a leader. I immediately felt, upon quitting, very passionate about going to law. I felt like that was the next evolution of my activism. You know, when I was applying to law school, I only applied to top law schools. I worked my butt off to get a really high LSAT. I worked my butt off in college to get a really high GPA, and so I figured, you know, if I'm gonna do law school, like, I might as well do it right. And so I ended up accepting my admission to Harvard Law School. I hope that my education just allows me to continue advocating for people. I have sort of this dream to work for like the ACLU or something like that. I'm very much of the belief that, like, you know, if you want to be a better person and if you want to grow as a person, like, you have to put yourself in environments where you're challenged and where you're not always going to be the smartest person in the room. You're not always going to be the most outspoken or the most thoughtful or empathetic. You have to be in a group of people who are going to challenge you in different ways. And I really thought that, you know, my choice is gonna put me in that position, and I'm hoping that it really just continues to help me grow as a person.